My name is Alex Dworjan. I'm an Ansible Solution Specialist, and today I'm going to be providing a technical deep dive into how I can use Ansible to start reducing some of my cloud spend. So, what business and technical challenge are many companies facing today? No matter what size of the company, whether it's a startup or a Fortune 500 company, most companies at this point have some sort of cloud presence. Whether it's just a single cloud or whether it's looking at both AWS Azure, Google Cloud, or also an on premise environment like VMware, there is a large amount of IT operations involved in trying to manage these different resources. Despite the IT operational overhead that may be involved, it's still a consistent objective to reduce that overall cloud cost. So, trying to be as efficient as possible while still taking advantage of many of the benefits of cloud with some of its agility and managed service offerings that aren't available in on premise environments. No matter what size company I am, I probably have a decent sized cloud spend. So even if it's as little as 600,000 or up to several $1 million, saving 10% of that can have a huge benefit on my overall IT organization and allow us to have additional projects that otherwise might not have been able to be funded because it's being dedicated to really unused resources in the cloud. So what can I look at to address? Obviously, I can ask different teams and they'll probably admit that, yeah, we're probably wasting some resource in the cloud. Either we've got an instance that's too large and isn't being utilized, or we've got workloads that we use for a development environment that really aren't being utilized anymore. So start looking at policies that you can implement and in many cases try to automate or enforce on a regular basis. So setting certain instances that are allowed, so maybe only 3 instance types are available out of the box for your end users. Maybe workloads are automatically shut down from Friday at 8 p.m. until Monday morning at 6 a.m. Maybe I've got expiration dates for development environments. So each development environment is only available for 30 days and then will automatically shut down. So look at different ways that I can leverage pieces to start managing some of this sprawl and really underutilized resources in the cloud. So how can Ansible fit into this? Ansible can work across all of those different cloud providers and hypervisors. So whether it's Azure, AWS, your on-prem VMware environment, I can use that to manage these different pieces. So I could use Ansible to turn off those development and test instances, the databases, every single weekend. So if I turned off for just 48 hours a week, I save 2/7 of the cost of those resources every single year. So that's about 28.5% annually. That's a giant savings, and anything on top of that I do in terms of right sizing instances or getting rid of unused resources increases that overall savings. So looking at something as simple as any virtual machine that's completely untagged, I will destroy, or I'll turn off any virtual machine that isn't tagged with an owner so I can find out who owns it and see if that resource still is needed. I can also tie it into any existing business process that you have, so I don't have to worry about everyone has to go through Ansible. I can use something like ServiceNow as that front end to maintain that service catalog they may already have. And then I can start looking at, well, how do I right size instances? So use existing monitoring tools to figure out a virtual machine has only used 5% of its memory over the course of the last 6 months. I can probably reduce the size of that instance. So there are many different ways that I can leverage Ansible to start streamlining some of my processes. So results. So this is something that in theory was something that I'd worked on with a customer, but it actually came true in practice. So by turning off their instances just for 2/7 of the week, so 48 hours, they were able to save over $170,000 on just their EC2 instances. They also did the same for their RDS instances that were tied into those EC2 instances, to save an additional $100,000. So with just an $80,000 rough overall monthly spend on these instances, they saved over $270,000 a year. You can fund quite a number of projects with $270,000 a year. So this was a great way for them to get started in automation, and also a great way for them to save the business quite a bit of money to start reallocating to other opportunities. So how was this actually implemented? So I want to focus on that turn off, turn on instance capability. So we looked at really an opt-in versus opt-out approach. So for that particular use case that we did, it was actually an opt-out type approach. So really everything was turned off unless a user specifically requested that their instances were not turned off during the designated time. I look at the other way in terms of an opt-in approach. So everyone has to specifically say, yes, these are the instances that I want to turn off, and here's the time frame that I want to turn them off on. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility where certain teams may be able to turn it off every single weekday after hours, while other teams may only be able to turn it off on the weekends because they're a global team. So it gives you that flexibility. But a lot of this is trying to figure out based on your team and your culture, which method that you can adopt. But still, no matter which method that you go with, communication is crucial as you go through this process. So looking at the different resource providers, the playbooks themselves are honestly very easy. I'll show the ones that I did for Azure in a minute, but it's simple as getting the information from all the virtual machines that have the specific tags or filters that I'm looking for, and then turning them off. The exact same process applies to turn them back on, whether it's Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud. And then the only other piece that I leverage is the Ansible collection. So either Ansible.tower or Ansible.controller, depending on which version of the platform that I'm using to create those schedules. So because I'm doing this all through ServiceNow as that front end, I can use that to set up my startup and shutdown to be every single week on Friday at 8 p.m. So it gives you a very easy way for end users to set up their schedules and then modify those schedules as well. So to actually dive into this, I'll show a demonstration of all of this taking place in Azure, including some of that additional tagging capability. So to start the demonstration, I'm going to jump into the Microsoft Azure console, and you can see that I have 3 virtual machines all up and running. So I'll jump into them to show the different tags that I have already set up. So you can see I am the owner of this particular virtual machine in my development environment. I have another virtual machine that I'm also the owner of in a test environment. And then my last virtual machine is also in the original development environment, but is owned by something else. So obviously I want the capability to only turn off certain virtual machines that I own. So that's exactly the capability that I've provided out. So in this case, I'm going to do this through ServiceNow. So I have ServiceNow set up with a service catalog for cloud savings. Because I'm logged in as myself, it's actually going to take that email directly from here. So all I have to provide is the environment tag that I want to turn off, when I want to turn this off. So obviously I want to give myself a little bit of time to do this. And then I want this turned back on maybe Friday at 8 p.m. So again, full flexibility, set the exact date and time that I want these instances to turn on and off. I can set how often I want these things to happen. So maybe I want every single day. If I want to turn it off on the weekends, I can pick week or month, again, depending on what your schedule is. And then I want this to happen every week, or I can even do every other week, just again, depending on what you want to do. So I want this to happen every single week. So I'm going to click order now. And that's going to launch a job in the automation platform to set up that schedule. So I can see that the job is running and it's going to create that schedule. If I don't have something like ServiceNow, I can do it directly through the automation platform. So here's that same job. I've created a survey and I can just hit launch and again, fill in that exact same information. So a very easy process, no matter what front end system I have. So you can see that that job is completed. And now I have the schedules for parking, which is stopping the instances for myself in dev, and unparking again for myself in dev. So this is going to run the stop job and the start job. You'll notice these times are in GMT. That's by design of what ServiceNow provides, but that also makes it easier depending on where customers are globally. I don't have to worry about trying to do any sort of math in the back end. I just have it auto default to GMT. But this job will still kick off now because Ansible will realize, yep, GMT is in this case 9:01 a.m. Eastern time, and take care of that problem for me. So that job will get started. And you can see that Azure Parking job has kicked off. So it will go through that stop process. So let's look at what the playbooks are as it goes through that process. So this is that playbook that I have to create the schedule. So it's using the Ansible.controller.schedule module, and it's using a plugin that basically calculates the rule itself. So I'm providing in, the frequency, day, month, week. I'm providing what time I want it to stop at. Again, I've defaulted GMT, and I want this to happen every week, every other week, and all those capabilities. Notice I'm passing in that owner and environment information to the name of the schedule. So it creates a different schedule for every single environment and every single owner. So if someone else came in, or I wanted to create a test environment schedule, I can do that as well. And then it passes to the start and stop job, which owner and which environment. So if I have different tags that I want to leverage, I could just change this portion and then also change the portion for the stop. Instead of it being, environment owner, I could just change that to be 2 different variables. Very easy to set this up, or I could have 4, 5, 6 variables if I wanted to add in region. So all I'm doing for that stop job is using the Azure API to get the current instances that meet this criteria and then turning them off. That's it. So I'm not using a CMDB, I'm not using an Ansible dynamic inventory. I'm getting this information directly from the Azure API to stop. And then all you'll notice that changes to the start as I change started to true. That's it. So a very simple process to turn off or turn on instances leveraging Ansible. And again, I can just change these capability. Maybe I've got a team that, hey, we stopped these instances on Friday and a critical issue came up. We need to work through these on Saturday morning. Well, I can just provide access to that parking start job with the server that's already set up, and they can enter in their owner and environment tag, and I'll automatically start those instances back up. So I still give that self-service capability to restart your instances if for some reason, something's gone on and work needs to be done during the typical shutdown time. So trying to give users as much flexibility as possible as they go through this. So obviously that job just finished, so I should be able to refresh my virtual machines, and you'll notice that only the one instance now is stopped, so the one that was owned by myself in that development environment. And you'll also notice that if I go back to the schedules, my park job has updated to be a week later. So we'll continue doing this as long as the schedule exists. I've got it set to essentially occur forever. So we'll continue updating this week after week, day after day. Obviously, maybe I want a different schedule to be created. So I want to go back in and set up that weekend job. So for my test environment, I actually want to turn off Friday at 8 p.m. and then turn back on Monday at, let's say, 6 a.m. I want to get as much time as possible in terms of savings, set this up to go week and run. So this should set up a second schedule in my environment for both parking and a second schedule for unparking. So when I log into the automation platform, I should now see 4 schedules designed for parking and unparking, one set for the development environment, one set for the test environment. So it just finished. I can now see that I've got a schedule for my dev and test, dev and test. If I want to change the existing test environment or existing development environment, I can just leverage the existing tag and it will update the current schedule, not create a new one. So again, it keeps track of all these pieces for you to streamline as much as possible. So what if I also want to do some additional savings? Maybe I want to provide the capability to turn off instances for owners for VMs that don't have a tag for an owner. So in this case, I'm actually going to edit this particular environment and I'm going to delete this owner, apply. And what I'm going to do is I've got this job called Azure Tag Automation Savings. And I basically have 3 options that I've set up. Perform the savings. So actually do the action that I have set up, which for an untagged instance will destroy it. For an instance without an owner, it will turn it off. And then obviously I wanted to get the untagged and the no owner information. So if I have these set to true, but this defaults, it'll just display the ones that don't meet those parameters without taking the action. So I can have that middle ground of not actually turning off people's instances or destroying them. So I'm going to run this job in its current state, and now it should also turn off that additional instance. And as you can see for this job, all again I have set up is leveraging the Azure API to pull all the virtual machines, figure out which ones are untagged so they have no tag attribute, or figure out the ones that don't have the owner tag set. Again, I can change if it's not called owner, if you've got a different name for it. It's as simple as changing this particular parameter. Then I display them and stop every non-owner instance. And then if it's untagged, I actually terminate that instance. Again, you can change this to map what you want. If you don't want to terminate, you want to turn it off. Again, I can just change this particular parameter. So that job will now run, and I can see that I'm going through that tag automation savings, and I can see that it is getting the untagged versions missing owner, and I do have one that is missing an owner. So again, I can display this, and now it's actually going through the process of stopping that owner instance. And because this is all being run through the automation platform, I have a full audit history. So I can see, hey, this stop job, when did it run? And very easily see which instances got turned off. And I can see the details of, well, why was that turned off? Well, I turned it off for myself as the owner in the development environment. So it makes it very easy to track this. If someone says, hey, why was my instance turned off or deleted? I can go back through and say, well, I can look at my Azure automation savings, see the fact that, well, it was missing an owner tag and it was turned off. And I can actually log back into the console and you'll notice that virtual machine was turned off. And I can set this because of the fact that, Ansible can leverage schedules. I can update this particular job template and have it run every single week to automatically apply those savings. So I don't have to worry about manually doing this every so often. Once again, I can leverage that schedule capability to run this maybe weekly on Saturday to clean out any old VMs. Same thing in terms of maybe virtual machines are only allowed to live for 30, 60, 90 days. I can build that process in. But if you notice, all of my virtual machines have specific tags that exist. So one of the things that I've done is whether I'm creating virtual machines through ServiceNow or through Ansible itself, I require users to put in the environment, the tag, and the owner as part of what they do. So obviously for ServiceNow, I take it directly from the user that's logged in, but then I require them to place an environment tag. And you can create a drop down so they don't have a choice in terms of which tags they use for tag consistency. And then I can do the same thing through the automation platform. So when I build out new VMs, even through here, again, I've got that same capability where it asks you for your email, pick your environment tag, and then the virtual machine information. So I'm guaranteeing that all of my systems are tagged with owner, environment information. And for me, I also add what operating system it is. So I can very easily keep track of all that information. And then this gives me the ability to generate reports so I can see exactly what's going on. So I do have a report that I leverage on a weekly basis that prints out all the existing tags. And as you can see, I actually just ran this one and it will show that this particular virtual machine doesn't have an owner in Azure, running in the development environment rel. So I've got a very easy way to keep track of who owns what. So I can go and find, hey, this virtual machine has been here for a while. Either it doesn't have an owner or it does have an owner, and now I know exactly who to contact for any issues arise. This is also good even for just general troubleshooting. If I'm having issues with a particular virtual machine or particular environment, now I know directly who to reach out to get those issues corrected. The last thing that I've kind of developed is more on kind of the self-healing automation capability. So looking at increasing CPU usage or decreasing to right-size instances. So in this case, leveraging VMware, I'm getting the VMware info, getting the CPU information, and then adding one core to it. If I want to reduce a core, get simple playbook change to be -1. In the cloud, I'd probably want to set using those specific instance types that I want. If it is, B2 and I want to shift it to B1, a very simple change in terms of those processes. So there may be a little bit more logic that you need to add in because maybe you only want to do that on weekends, but it's definitely something that you can easily add in. And since I talked about that tagging capability, as you can see, for all of my provisioning jobs, I make sure I add in those specific tags. And because these are required fields in my surveys, I don't have to worry about them being omitted because they will always populate in this information. So I can have an exact idea of who is operating what in my environment. And then I've got full capability to keep track of exactly what VMs exist where and were created by who. So for that resource optimization piece, you're probably going to be leveraging some sort of monitoring tool, whether it's Prometheus, Dynatrace, really some agent that exists on that host to monitor for CPU usage or memory usage. Those are honestly the two most common ones that I see. And that either can send a notification to something like ServiceNow or can honestly trigger it directly through AAP to have that issue remediated and really automatically implement those cloud savings. And that's the key part of a lot of the policies that I talked about earlier is I've required them to be in effect. I've mandated owner tags. I've mandated environment tags. I've even predefined which ones teams can use so I have tag consistency as I go through this. You could even add in for anything that is development, require number of days that this virtual machine will exist. Add in 30 days. And then again, as part of those regular occurring jobs, so maybe I don't just remove owners or non-owner tags and virtual machines that have no tags at all, I could also check to see is this virtual machine expired and then terminate it as well. So very easy to automate a lot of these processes. So as I looked at this, we've successfully added a customer. What did we learn? We did learn that in some cases we went below the committed spend or the total number of reserved instances. So just something to keep in mind. It's perfectly fine to go underneath. Obviously, if I'm not using the instances, I don't need to keep them on. But teams also noted they were able to do more during the week. So while they were shutting down instances during off hours, and there may be teams, people log in during the weekend just to get additional work done, there was less weekend work going on, but productivity in terms of those projects didn't decrease. So the same amount of work was getting done, but it was getting done during the normal business hours, which meant the help desk teams, the operational teams, the on-call teams didn't have additional workloads during those off-hour periods because they had significantly fewer tickets on the weekends. That also meant the experts in those systems were available because it was happening during normal business hours if an issue came up. So obviously this is something that you need to communicate early and often. So the particular team that did this, they were very clear since they had the opt-out approach. They let everyone know that this is going to be in effect. This is the weekend that it's going to get started. Unless you tell us otherwise, all of these instances will get turned off for them, Friday to Sunday. Very important to communicate that. And also, they've communicated back the savings that they've achieved. So it helps with getting that buy in of, hey, by the way, we've now kept track of your instances. So especially if you have chargeback programs or anything like that, where you charge specific business units for the resource that they provide, you could show them directly, hey, we actually destroyed several VMs that you aren't using anymore that saved you hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially a year. So this definitely can be a very fruitful process as you look into different ways to save on some of your cloud spend. So no, this was a very deep technical dive and showed a lot of the different playbooks. I will share the different repositories down in the description section. And please let me know if you have any questions, but there's definitely a great opportunity to optimize some of your significant cloud spend, whether it's Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, or even your on-premise environment. Thank you.